A very good evening to all of you. I don't hear a good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good
Great.
evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Very good
Great,
evening,
yeah.
Malini.
Thank you
I'm
so
Dr.
much.
Lata from Chennai.
Hey, very nice to have you, Lata. Right, so the topic today is being decisive. You know, looking at the tectonic situation outside. I thought this would be the best topic because a lot of decisions have to be made these days. Crisis scenario, right? So that's the reason why I came up with this topic. So just let me give you a very brief introduction about myself, a very small introduction. So could you see my next slide?
Yeah, those slides are on the left, but currently the first slide is in focus.
Okay.
You can press arrow down.
Yeah, now the second one
Yeah.
came up. Yes.
Great, sounds good, yes. So that's a brief introduction about myself. I've done my master's in English literature from the University of Madras and also a law graduate from the Ambedkar Law College. And looking at my professional experience, I've been into this training domain for quite some time now, almost more than a decade, I'd say. So I specialize in behavioral skills training. Voice and accent neutralization is my forte too. And I also do this POSH training. I train people in the inquiry proceedings as well as the general awareness sessions for POSH. So let's understand from you a bit as to what exactly do you mean by a person who is decisive? Anybody from the audience?
Let's use the chat box to answer. That would be better.
Great, yes.
Yeah.
So you can just understand whatever you understand, just put in your items in the chat box. What do you understand by the term being decisive? Okay, so we have not procrastinating as one of it, and Somali says person who takes decision without dithering. Excellent. Think about, feel about a certain situation or thing. All right, so if there's no need for this training as such, so given all your inputs, I understand that this is going to be more of a discussion and a lot of give and take here. All right, so that's precisely what it is. So as a refresher, I'd say that these are the characteristics, typical characteristics of a person who's decisive. Somebody already mentioned it's the firmness in making decisions, right? And so if you look at a person who is decisive, the confidence is exuded. There is an element, a tone of assurance, and there is an element of strength in the way he takes up decision. Agreed? Also, how many of us do have a tendency to take decision when there is an element of uncertainty? Right? So when everything is so volatile in the VUCA world, and so are we capable of taking certain decisions when when the situations are a crisis one or when there are uncertainty? Is it possible? So a person who is decisive, it really doesn't matter whether it's a crisis situation or any situation, he can make certain good decisions, right? So now that we kind of understood what the characteristics of a decisive person is all about, okay, so let's also check what are the characteristics of a person who is not decisive. Can you also input your ideas here into the chat list? Okay, so we have someone saying to have clarity and assertive. Okay, so someone who cannot make decisions, all right, who is not being decisive there. Always shifting, great. Always shifting, unable to make up his mind Yes, dithering. That's a nice word, Somali. Very nice word indeed. Um, Also, okay, this is also right. So there's an element of uncertainty in that, right? Okay. So now let's look at characteristics of a person who is not decisive. Okay, so like most of you have input in the chat window, right? So here he lacks the confidence to make a choice, right? So a person who lacks confidence in making a choice, or in the times of crisis, he finds it very difficult to make decisions, and most of the times he's stressed out because of it. And someone who is easily influenced by others' opinions or others' influence, more of an external person. So if you look at the person, his locus of control would be more of an external person as opposed to being an internal person, because he is reliant on others' influence to make decisions, right? And so even when a choice is made, the ability to stick on to the choice is very, very difficult for such a person. And in the process of taking decisions, he may have to count on others for making the final decisions, right? Okay. So are you all with me?
Yes,
So I'd like to
Malini.
hear at least a one or
Yes,
two.
Yeah, we are
yes,
there. We are there.
yes, Malini.
We are there.
Yes,
We
Malini.
unmuted
Okay.
because of the background sound.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, so maybe at least Gaurav, if I get cues from Gaurav or Indra, so I feel
Sure.
I'm
Sure,
interacting
sure.
with people. Great,
Yeah,
sounds good.
yeah.
All right. Okay, so now that we've said that there are times when people, that's a saying, right? I don't know if you've heard of it. There's a saying which says it's better to take wrong decisions than not take decisions at all. Right? So because so many times when people want to make decisions, but somehow something is stopping them from making a decision, right? So would anybody want to be with that kind of a person or engage or hire their services? Actually not. At the same time, just because we say that it's better not to take a wrong decision than not decision at all, it is also equally important not to take snap decisions, right? Not to take snap decisions which are very impulsive when there is no emotional control, or a decision which might give you a result only for a momentary period and it's not a long lasting decision, or something which is not very certain or not resolute, right? Okay, so what are the barriers a person faces while making decisions? What do you think are the barriers a person faces while taking decisions?
Confusion, too many attributes, less time.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
Lack of
Excellent. Yeah.
lack of data points.
Lack of data points. Agreed. Great. So I'm just going to discuss one or two concepts in here today. All right. So what are these concepts and how is it going to help us is what we're going to focus for today. So there is something called a cognitive dissonance. All right. How many of you have heard of this concept? And what does it mean?
I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't.
Okay, great. So there is some value in this particular model, right? So this concept was essentially launched by Leon Festinger, right? So Leon Festinger is a psychologist who belongs to the 1950s period, and he's of the opinion that almost all of us face something called cognitive dissonance, right? So it's the simple meaning of dissonance.
Lack of
Maybe
understanding
lack of understanding.
or confusion.
Confusion, okay.
Not being on the same page with the answers.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So typically it's being unharmonious in your mind. Okay. So there is some kind of a discord. There is some kind of an unharmony in your minds. Okay. So what causes the unharmony? We will look into into it in details, right? So the moment you say cognitive, it's a process of thinking. It's a process of thoughts. And dissonance in the process of thoughts having some kind of incongruity in it, and there is a lot of disturbance in it. There's an unharmony element in it. Okay, so let's look at what it is about in detail, right? So when there are a set of beliefs that each of us make, okay, so we have a very strong concept or a very strong core concept of a belief system. When that belief system is rejected by a stronger evidence, or when there is a new evidence that comes up which kind of shakes your existing beliefs, then there is an element of unacceptance in it. Agreed? So you're of the belief, yes. So because of the new element that's coming in, which shakes your thoughts or which shakes your existing belief, it creates a disharmony in your mind. The feelings become very uncomfortable, and there is inconsistency in the thought patterns. So because of which we tend to rationalize or ignore the new concept, ignore the new evidence that's offered. Anything which does not fit into your core belief, the mind tends to reject it, right? So this element of cognition, when there is a dissonance, the mind tries to get the consonance of it. That is, the mind tries to get some kind of congruity to it, right? So because of these cognitive dissonance elements, a person cannot take the right decisions on time. So is it like getting clearer to some extent?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes.
So let's look into it. So let's not have any kind of dissonance at this point of time, understanding such such bombastic terminology. I'm going to simplify this for you further. Okay, so what does that exactly mean now? Now, there are a set of beliefs that you have. For example, so do you see the cause?
Malini, a small request. Can you little expand this slide, because the size of the slide is so small. Maybe you'll have to make it 50% at least. It's around 30-40%, I believe. You'll like to expand the size of the slide at the bottom. Am I audible to you,
so
Malini?
looks like we got disconnected for some reason. Yes. I got out of the meeting for some reason.
Malini, I'm suggesting to expand the size of the slide, You make it 50%. Because it's around 30%. It's not visible.
Or Malini, Mamta here, use the slideshow
The slide
mode.
is not visible?
Yes,
Press
Malini.
Shift F5. Press Shift F5 on your
How is
computer.
it now?
No.
Is this visible now?
No.
Malini, the slide is visible, but it's not big enough because you're not on slideshow mode. So if you go into slideshow mode or presenter mode, there's a tab called slideshow on top. Next to home, insert, design, animation, slideshow. If you click on slideshow.
Okay. Yeah.
Keep going up.
Yeah. So say from current slide.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just checking on this.
Right.
Just go to from the current slide.
Or
Yeah, that will
Yeah.
also work.
or Gaurav, do you think you can take the access? For some reason, mine isn't. Would you be able to use the?
Okay, so you just keep on presenting for another minute. I'll download your PPT and start presenting in a minute, okay?
Sure.
Just
Okay,
carry
so
on with the
meanwhile,
subject.
certainly. Okay.
Oh,
So meanwhile, I'll walk you through this. So there is a belief system that you have that you are. Let's take the example of an interview. Okay. So you are going for a job role. And this job role is actually not very enticing to you. It's not really interesting. Okay. So because it involves a lot of Excel presentations and you are no good in Excel. Right. Now, what is the belief that you have is that you are not good for that. Nevertheless, you will have to go for the interview, and you tell the interviewer that you just love this profile, you are cut out for this, and you're good in Excel. Now, what is actually happening to your belief and the action? So what's actually happening to your belief and the action is that there is a disharmony, there's a discord between both, right? And just to justify the action that you have taken, that's to say that, yes, you like this job role, you try to say that, yes, I did say because I wanted the job or I wanted that money. So although it's contrary to your belief, you are changing the belief system itself completely there. Although you accepting the job, there is some kind of a disharmony. You see that? So the decision that you have made is not really happy decision because there is some kind of a disharmony in your mind. Okay, so let's look at some other example here. Now, let's look at cognitive dissonance. So when there is an element of dissonance, what is your aim?
Malini, can you repeat the question?
Yes. So when there is an element of dissonance in cognitions, what do you do? When there is an element of dissonance, yeah.
We make assumptions.
Okay. We make assumptions. All right, so let's look into it. Okay, so now let's see this particular thing. So we try to reduce the dissonance. When the moment an element of dissonance comes in, because that's not your natural self, right? That's certainly not your natural self. So you try to look for aiming towards a consonance, aiming towards some kind of a congruity, right? For example, so do you see the screen that Gaurav has shared? You try to reduce the dissonance screen. Do you see that, all of you?
Yes, we see it.
Yes.
Okay. So where is the cognitive dissonance here? So it says when you have a thought that domestic abuse is bad, all right, and you will no way put up with this kind of a domestic abuse. That is a very strong attitude that you have in your mind. Nevertheless, in your demonstration or in your behavior, you actually continue to stay in this abusive relationship, right? So is there an element of dissonance there? Because your belief pattern is one thing, but you're actually not practicing the belief system. You're not putting that into practice, right? Okay, so now what do you think is the only solution to reduce the dissonance? The only solution to reduce the dissonance is to change your attitude as well, right? Now let's look at this element where you try to reduce the dissonance factor there. So here, so the attitude that prevails in your mind. Now let's look at this as a separate segment, all right? So let's look at attitude as a separate segment here. So here your attitude that prevails is that your partner does not mean to hurt you. He could probably be negating certain things that that is there. He could probably not be congruent to whatever you're saying. There could be a lot of argumentations in your interactions or transactions. Nevertheless, he does not mean to really abuse you. So that is what is the thought that you have. So because he is not going to hurt you and it's not an abusive mentality that is there, the demonstration of behavior would be, I am not in an abusive relationship, so there is absolutely no need for me to leave this. So what happens here is that you're reducing the dissonance there. All right. So what I'm trying to say here is, I'm not asking you to say when there is an element of abuse, I'm not asking you to treat it as a non-abuse. No, that is not what I'm asking you to do. When you are really feeling that you are in an abusive relationship and you are against putting up, you rather get out of that abusive relationship. All right, so to maintain the dissonance, to maintain in the consonance and reduce the dissonance factor there, right? So when the reducing dissonance happens, you automatically try to take better decisions in your life. Right, so this concept, I would really suggest you to go look into it, because there are several segments that constitutes a dissonance in cognitions. Gaurav, can we move to the next slide, please? Okay, so let's look at the elements quickly. All right, so when your beliefs or your assumptions are contradicted by new information, so something which is projected with evidence, still there is a non-acceptance from your side. So if you have to really, if I just have to do a quick run through of this element of cognitive dissonance, non-acceptance of new behavior or non-acceptance of new belief system which contradicts your existing system, or when there are two contradictory actions or two contradictory beliefs that you have in your mind, then the dissonance sets in. All right. So to what extent this dissonance is not going to disturb you depends on the magnitude of the interference or magnitude of the interruption. Right. So now that we've looked at the dissonance factor as such, right? So let's park this aside and let's see how this can be used, whether we can eliminate it completely. Is it even possible to eliminate it completely? Or do you find this dissonance factors in every element of your life? We'll look into it, all right? So you can probably answer that. You can probably take up live examples that you have, and we can have a discussion around this if time permits towards the end. Now, let's look at a model of how we can take decisions systematically, and how this cognitive dissonance also could be reduced to a greater extent when we have a thorough process of making decisions. Right? So how many of you here just say yes if you have heard of this concept of ladder of inference anytime? So just type a yes in the chat window. You could either respond or you can just type a yes or a no in the chat window. So the idea is just to see if I can contribute more value. Okay, so I hear a yes from Mamta, and the others, someone said no. Okay, so let's look at the next slide. So this, I'm going to get you to do an activity. So here, this are we making a reasoned decision? It's with the help of ladder of inference tool that we are going to understand if we can make a. So someone, please unmute yourself, the others. Okay, right. So do we make any reasoned decisions, or is there any process that we walk through? Is there any specific methodology we go through decisions? Although there are different set of models that we have in decision making, this particular format, can I go to the next screen, please, Gaurav? Yes. So here I am going to get you to do an activity here. So if you have a pen and paper with you, or you can just pull up a Word document in your systems and try doing this activity. Okay, so do you see a ladder there? Just type a yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So this particular ladder is deliberately put in a wrong order. Okay, so the order is inappropriate, and you have to look at a bottom to top approach here. Okay, so the ladder, how you interpret this ladder is, you look at a bottom to top approach, right? Starting from beliefs to the seventh one, the conclusions. Now, for any logical steps involved in decision making per se, what is the order that you would choose? I'll give you 5 minutes to do this. Just write it down in your book, or you can just put it up in the chat window, suit yourself. So is this clear, or do you want me to repeat myself?
It's clear, Malini. It's clear.
Thanks, Indra. Thanks for confirming. So the moment you complete, please type a yes in the chat window. So there are about 10 participants I see, or 15.
I think most people may have been done, Malini.
Okay, great. All right, so let's discuss this in a bit. And okay, so how this ladder of inference has a wider applicability. So that's why this the logic of choosing this particular decision making as a tool. Could we go and see the right order? So perhaps you could just cross check with the right order. Now the presented one is the right order. Okay, so that's the bottom to top approach. And then we will look into each segment and what it indicates. We can go back. Yes, so this is the correct element. This is the rectified one. So if you look at 1 to 7, okay, so this is the correct one. So I don't know how many of you have got it right, or if you beg to differ on that.
I got it all wrong, so I think I'm waiting for your explanation.
Okay, great. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's look at the next slide, and we'll look at every segment of it, and we'll see how this is going to be a very effective decision-making tool. Okay, so we are generally given an observable data. All right, there are certain reality and facts. That's the first level of the ladder. All right. And what we do essentially is, after that, we select certain data which grasps our attention or probably what's appealing to us. Now, there is so much of information available everywhere, right? So what is the data that I select? Now, let me give you a practical example. Since we have people from all walks, from the education industry and from the corporate sector, people from the teaching industry, from schools, colleges, we will take a very practical example that we do day in, day out in our daily homes, okay? So in your chat windows, I want you to type what washing machines that you have in your house. Can all of you, I just would like to see in your chat windows, what washing machines you have in your house.
Bosch.
Gaurav, is it Gaurav?
Yeah.
Okay, I expected that out of you, Gaurav. Let's look at the others also. I don't see any chats, so do I assume that you all don't have washing machines at home?
No, Malini, a lot of us have typed in the chat box.
I don't see the chat box for some reason.
The control is
Click on
Gaurav.
click on the
Okay,
chat
okay,
icon.
let me. Yes, show conversation. Oh yes, Whirlpool, IFB, LG, Bosch. Great. So there's just two people who has Bosch, and then we have LG. Most of us have. Okay, so when we are selecting, all right. So let me take my own example. All right. So I select that I look at various options. Okay, and I select what appeals to me. Perhaps I select Bosch and LG and a Whirlpool because those are the most prominent ones. And So what I'm typically doing is I'm selecting the reality, that is selecting the certain things from out of a lot of options, okay, because which appeals to me. Perhaps I look at the torque, perhaps look at the RPM, or I look at the space utilization. So I come up with one or two of it, right? Then what I essentially do is I add cultural meanings to it. How do I interpret which one to buy? What decisions do I do? What kind of interpretation would I come up with? I probably feel that compared to an American product, a German machinery is generally reliable, right? It's generally reliable. And although that's not, the moment you ask a person what machine they have, it's mostly LG and Whirlpool, and that's exactly what I see in the chat window. Despite that, I pick up something else because I interpret that a German machine is more reliable. And I form an assumption that not just the automobiles, but any machinery that you take, although they're not in the space of a washing machine earlier, although they have launched their product new, I feel that they cannot fail. So I make an assumption because it's a German product, they don't fail. So based on that, I'm drawing a conclusion that all German products are very reliable. So I don't have to look at an American gadget or an Indian product or a Chinese product. So I draw my conclusions based off that, right? I conclude and I draw my belief system that the other products somehow are not reliable as opposed to a German machinery, right? And then I buy the product of a Bosch because of all these reasons. So essentially what's happening here, if you look at this ladder, is that it's like a reflexive loop. So the belief system that you hold that the German products are more superior as opposed to the other products will kind of tell you what kind of data to select the next time. So it's like a reflexive loop. So it goes back. The beliefs that you hold, it influences the data that you select. Or the data that you select kind of forms your belief system. Agreed? Does it make sense? Or
True. It's true.
Okay. All right. So let's look at the next slide. Now let's look at the, I'm just going to give you a run through of this again, all right? So the pool of information is available to you. You have the observable data and experiences. Then you select, because it is not possible for us to select every single thing. It's not possible to select all the information on hand. So you select whatever is significant, whatever is appealing to you, right? By ignoring the others. Then you interpret the data by coming up with your own cultural meanings. You add your personal touch to it, and it totally depends upon your interpretation. If you look at the next slide, it says that in the next slide, it says that it's based on your interpretation that you form assumptions. Okay, so these assumptions, now every time you step up the ladder, you have to make a very, very careful selection, very, very careful thought process, that is, all right? You just cannot make assumptions like that. You have to make assumptions only after interpreting it appropriately. Because it's your assumptions which turns to conclusions, and then again, the belief system that you establish, which again leads to the actions that you take, right? So now that we understand the application of ladder of inference, in a while, I'm going to get you to, probably one of you to talk about an organizational scenario where you can apply this, all right? So can we move on to the next slide, please?
Is this the one? LOI enables decisiveness?
Yes. So now, do you feel that it kind of promotes your decisiveness? What do you think? Do you think this tool would be effective enough?
What is LOI? LOI stands?
LOI is the ladder of inference. I'm sorry, I didn't give that clarity. So LOI is the ladder of inference. So you take this either as a personal tool or a tool professionally in your organizations, right? So you are very aware of your thoughts and reasoning. So if you have to tell your management, you have a very clear-cut steps that you have taken. because you're giving the management a reasoning process behind, as there is a step-by-step analysis. And anytime you feel that you have not made the right action, or if you feel that you have interpreted something inappropriately, then there's always an option. So can we just move to the next slide, please? Right, so these kind of questions will enable you to look at the LOI in detail, because this, as an instrument, it's not used only in a professional scenario. It can be used in your day in, day out of your everyday lives, right? So, so these are the certain questions that you select. Am I selecting the right data, or do I have to go back and at the very first step, I have to spend more time in getting a range of data? Should I select more data or better data? Am I confining myself to only a specific part of the data? Do I have to expand the horizons and look at it in a different way? So is my interpretation okay, or do I think I have to change my interpretation? And am I assuming it inappropriately, or is there a segment of reasoning behind my assumptions, right? So are the conclusions drawn based on the facts, or do I have to relook at the facts? So is my action taken appropriately based on following these steps? So these kind of questioning process will help you to take a reasoned decision by applying the ladder of inference. All right. So apart from using this as an individual tool just for yourself, you can use this in your organizations or with your teams. If I can go to the next slide. So how this can be effectively used with the organizations or with their teams. Can I see the next slide, please? Okay, so this is the pictorial representation. And so we call it the meeting of minds with teams. Sometimes your manager might question you as to why you have chosen a specific decision. Or you as a manager, you may have to explain to your leaders why you have chosen this, right? So it's a good way. So if you look at this particular interpretation, it says you have to walk up the ladder slowly, because you can't be hasty here. It's a step-by-step process, and you can be really explicit. You can explain every single rung of the ladder. And you can also, as an inquiry process, you can just fall back and go down the ladder by, so as a leader, you can perhaps question your manager. As a manager, you can question your people as to why you have chosen this particular conclusion. Why did you want to eliminate your recruiting team completely? And why did you patronize our online recruiters? Is there a reason behind doing it? Example. Right? So when you apply this process, you can just walk down each rung of the ladder and you give an explanation. And if in case there is some kind of discord, or if your leader does not agree, you can always go back, and the leader can also help you in which step you're going wrong. Agreed? Do you think it makes sense?
Of course.
Okay, so let's look at the next one. So this is a very quick tool. So what you do is you probe each other's reasonings in meetings. So I can say, Thirumal, perhaps you are not interpreting it appropriately. Or I can say, Mamta, you know what, let me understand if you are in this rung of the ladder. Are you in the rung of a belief, or are you in the rung of selecting reality? So perhaps you're not checked into all the elements. Okay, so let me go back to the recruitment example. So in your organization, all of a sudden you decide to have online recruiters by doing away with external consultancy, or by doing away with your internal recruiters, right? So as a leader, I'm saying, maybe as a HR manager, you're making a very premature conclusion. A COVID scenario may be a tentative one. So this does not warrant you to take a premature conclusion and state that everything should be moved to an online hiring. There is a negative connotation to it, or probably it's not going to motivate your recruiters enough. You might not get the appropriate talent pool. So you might want to go back and select the right data. Look at more research, look at more extensive data. So I will help them. The moment I realize that you are in this rung of the ladder, I know that this is where the intervention is required, right? So it kind of enables your decision-making process as such. So let's look at the next one. We've almost come to the fag end of it. So now just circling back to what an effective or a decisive leader or a decisive person is, all right? So someone who can make a decision, and not just making a decision, there are times when you make a decision and you don't do anything about it. Okay, that does not call for a decisive personality. A person who makes a decision will stay in its execution, ensure that it is completely executed, and if in case there's any fallback or any shortcomings, he will work on the feedback, take feedback from people, and if required, alter certain situations, make adjustments, and completely support until it is executed or until it's carried out. All right, so certainly, yes, it's okay to make a wrong decision, but not taking a decision at all sometimes could be a killer. So based on cognitive, now with this kind of a process in place, do you think cognitive dissonance also could be reduced to some extent? We understand that these are the elements of dissonance that you have, right? So we can bridge in both here as a very effective decision-making tool. Now let's move to the next one. I would like to, before we move to the question and answer, there are certain other things that I'd like to discuss quickly. So can we quickly go to the next one? So I think I have to first attribute to the source that I have taken information, because it's very, very important from where the source has been derived from. So these are the websites and these are the books that I have referred before coming to this kind of a module. And these are the citations. Before we move to the questions. So interestingly, today I have certain questions for you before you come up with questions for me. Okay, so are we good with the citations, with the source? Can we?
Yeah, we can move on.
Okay, so can we move to the next one, the next slide?
Is this the one? What are your thoughts?
Yes, please. All right, so based on the ladder of inference, can you give me an office scenario, organizational scenario where you can implement this, or you have implemented before? Anybody in the amongst the participants? So I see that there are participants from outside Hyderabad also. It would be nice to hear from you folks as well. So where do you think you have applied this? It could be an everyday scenario that in your lives, or it could be an organizational scenario.
Yeah, Malini, I think, can I speak?
Yes, please, Tirmal.
Because there's a lot of silence, so I thought let me speak up now. So I was just wondering, see, many a times, whatever the decisions being taken, right in the beginning, I was talking about, data points. I think what I could see is that maybe we are applying some of these 7 steps, not exclusively all of them, but there could be a possibility that a few of these steps which are spoken in the ladder of inference, probably we were able to do some of them, but not exclusively like 7 steps which are shown in the ladder. So this now gives us a kind of a scope to eliminate any pitfalls going forward. If you can really apply all of these 7 steps, the decisions which we take would be accurate and appropriate, which will yield us results.
Right. So in fact, yes, like Tirmal said, I agree with you. Unconsciously, we take these kind of steps, although we do not, abide by this framework. We may not be using this framework per se, but unconsciously we follow these steps day in, day out. And I'm sure some of you must have heard a different kind of steps involved in the ladder of inference as such, right? And do you think this can be practically implemented in your work life? Do you think you can help your management, explain to your management that you are basing on these steps, you have to take a decision. You are in the specific rung of the ladder.
I think it will take some practice, Malini, but it definitely can be implemented. I
Yes.
think we still have to internalize the concept, and then it'll take us some time and practice, and then conscious practice. Being aware of applying these steps when we are making the decision.
Great, sounds good. All right.
And for me, I'm attending this from the businessman perspective, although I do not have any seniors or someone to answer to, but I myself make decisions, and then people like कि नहीं थोड़ा it helps me in negotiating a little bit. They'll tell you that कि इतना क्यों है, reduce करो price so I like at least gives me certain step कि भाई this is how I arrived, or at least it will help me that what is the thought process I have to go through to avoid some to come to conclude something and stick to it, something
Great.
like that.
Right, perfect.
Malini, one more observation I want to make. At level 1, we are talking about reality and facts, selected reality. And at the level 3, when we talk about interpreted reality, so there is a possibility of going wrong at the interpretation. Now,
Absolutely.
So we interpret to our advantage. The interpretation is always to our advantage. So there's a possibility of getting blindsided with some, the opportunities which we miss out in the while we are interpreting. There's always this possibility of being biased.
Yes, so that's the reason why. So especially when you have it with your teams or with the manager can always. So you are probably not interpreting it appropriately. How about changing your interpretation? So these are certain questions that you can, ask yourself, or you can intervene and tell your management that maybe your interpretation is not appropriate, right? Yeah. So thanks a lot for those inputs, Thermal.
My pleasure.
All right. So do we have any questions? Well, let's just finish the last slide, and that's for you all. So that's a thank you from my end. So that's a nice quote that I came across. And so, just because something gets hard doesn't mean you made the wrong choice. Like when you started something, you felt that it was an appropriate choice, right? So in between somewhere, you might feel that it's wrong, but stick to it. Stick to it because that's not, you didn't start off with the wrong notation. Great. So thank you so much for your participation. Now it can be open for question and answer.
Hello, Malini, can I speak? Am I audible?
Yeah, who's this?
Yeah, my name is Shankala. I'm calling from Chennai.
Yes, Shankar.
Yeah, thank you so much. See, like, whenever we discuss about decision making per se, the assumption is that, like, we all human beings are 100% rational, and then we are prepared for rational level of discussion at every stage of the job or our career. But in many cases, like, more than rationality, and then, like, people's attachment to their opinions, their feelings, their interpretations, and that plays a very, very significant role.
Right.
When somebody is my, like, he's a bit junior to me, like, I'll be in a position to, like, discuss about the ladder, you know what you created just now. But then, like, when the other person is slightly, like, he's a bossy kind of a figure, and like, he is like, I report him. Many times, people are not willing to accept that it's only a kind of interpretation they have made.
Absolutely, yes.
Now, how do you see, like, wherever I see, like, decision making, we assume it's 100% decision making. I'm sorry, 100% rational, and that is where my bigger questions about decision making per se comes. How do we eliminate the 100% rational approach? People are nothing but feelings. People are nothing but stock of feelings. That's my personal view, and very rarely people are willing to give up their opinions, point of view, or whatever. So how do you work with those kind of people using this kind of ladders? See, conceptually it works fine, but then in practically, when you have limited time in a meeting, in a conversation, you have to quickly go through a decision. How does it really work?
Okay, so let me try to answer that. So like you said, sometimes we do have to take decisions based on our gut feelings, all right? It's not always rationalized or always logical. So a gut maybe instincts, based on instincts also you make decisions, all right? And like you said, applying this in the practical scenario when you have to, when you really have to fasten the process and you really want to. So such kind of a ladder of inference, when you internalize it, because like I said, this is just a step or a framework that is shown. Nevertheless, you have actually internalized this process, even without a knowledge. It's a subconscious process that actually takes in your mind. Now, this gadget or this tool gives you some kind of a framework to show that if you can always revisit your thoughts and revisit and say that this is where you're stuck. Okay, so what you're trying to do is you're giving some kind of a symbol to your consciousness. It unconsciously happens. All of us keep doing this in our minds, all right? So you take a decision, all right? So you buy this, obviously you don't go buy something, or obviously you don't take the decision completely, right? There is some kind of a process that goes behind. Now what we're telling you is this is the framework perhaps that you have followed.
Okay.
So Shankar Lal, does it kind of answer the question?
Yeah, it answers, definitely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So.
And I have one more question.
Mm-hmm.
See, when you say like on the title is like being decisive. Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah. See,
yes, Shankar.
Yeah, decision making, like in my experience of like in the last 20-25 years, it's a domain of some people who are 100% sure of themselves.
Okay.
And they are comfortable, okay with kind of like a consequences of like decisions.
No, let me just get that straight. You're saying that people who are decisive are 100% right. That's what you're trying to say?
No, they're 100% sure of themselves.
Right.
And if the decision doesn't work, it's also okay with them.
Absolutely. See, each one of us, and a person who is assured, like I said, there is a saying, right? So even if the decision is the wrong decision, still making a decision is important. So a person who is decisive does not necessarily mean that he takes all right decision 100% of time. The decisions could go wrong. Yet there is an element of conviction when you take the decision, standing by it, or when you know that it's not going wrong, the ability to alter without faltering, without crumbling under pressure, sticking to it or altering the decision is what matters. With 100% assurance and conviction in yourself is all about a person who is decisive, as opposed to a person who is counting on others always for making decisions. You see that? So it's all about being assured about yourself while taking decisions. Yes, Tirmal.
Yeah, Malini, in fact, I wanted to come in the first question when Shankar had asked. At that time, my audio was on mute, so I didn't realize that. Later, I realized it. See, the question which he asked was that if someone is, humans are a bundle of emotions, and so they take emotional decisions.
Right.
To that, my observation is, for a person who is emotional, maybe if a person in a conversation, if you can address that emotional part of it, that if you empathize and acknowledge this point of view, then come back to the data points. Probably that person will be more receptive. Will be more receptive. Shankar, I hope you are listening.
Yeah, I'm listening. Yeah.
So maybe if you can address their emotional element, acknowledge them, appreciate and empathize, and then come back to the data points. So his acceptance and receptiveness will go up. If I only talk on data points and logical rationality, then you are not addressing his emotional element of that particular individual. So maybe in the conversation, he has to start at the emotional level and then take it to the logical level. Probably then the individual would be more receptive,
Okay.
Yeah, that's one.
Right,
yes.
Got it. Yeah, Malini, one more follow-up question.
Thanks, Tirmal, for that, by the way. Empathy is certainly an element, yes. Shankar Lal, yes, please.
Yeah. Malini, you have a lot of people who are under who are under you, and somewhere you groom people after some time, and then they're supposed to take over the next level responsibilities. But then people are willing to execute as per the instructions per se. But then when it comes to crucial decisions, many people they fumble there, and they're not even willing to do that. Is there anything which a leader has to do to ensure that people can become decisive? It's not just leader being decisive. How do the leader makes the other people also to to take responsibilities and being decisive and then take decisions comfortably? Is there a tool available, or how do you do that? I know it's more to coaching and then giving freedom, all those kind of stuff. But then is there any framework available for that?
Right. Shankar Lal, a very, very valid question that you have here. So like Tirmal said, so there are a lot of elements here. So it's, you have tools, you have so many tools, but just a tool alone might not suffice in changing the attitude, because what you're talking about is a component of a behavioral element in it.
Yeah.
It's an attitudinal shift.
Right.
Okay, so being decisive also certainly got to do with change in the behavior, change in the attitude. So a person who is not decisive today does not necessarily mean he's never decisive, all right? He can certainly adapt to the trait. He can certainly learn the traits of being decisive by going through this attitudinal elements change and the behavioral coaching. He can certainly change that, okay? And he can be a decisive person. It's like as good as learning to be assertive. An aggressive person learning to be assertive, or a passive person learning to be assertive. Is that possible? Because it's a behavioral attitude that we need to learn somewhere. Similarly, even being decisive is a characteristic trait of a leader who learns in the process. All right. So all you have to do is give the awareness to the employees that yes, decisiveness is a very, very important leadership trait, a characteristic that one needs to have in order to be presented as a leader, as an independent, as an individual. All right. So it's somewhere the awareness that you create amongst your employees.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
I hope that answers.
Yeah,
right.
definitely.
Thank you so much.
Malini, can I add on to your point?
Yes,
Malini,
Tirmal,
can I add on?
absolutely.
Yeah, I want to add up to your point. Yeah, great. I think, what I find here is he was talking about subordinate not willing to take decisions and they are very insecure or uncertain about it. The role of a manager could be you should allow the people to make mistakes. You should allow to make the people to, you should allow to make the mistakes. You should allow the people to make the mistakes. And then what the other point is, you should not reprimand for what they make mistakes, because the moment you reprimand, they will not take decisions in the going forward. So that's that amount of risk appetite a manager should have, that allowing people to make mistakes. One. Now the second point is, if the manager can make the people feel it is easy to correct, even if they go wrong in their decisions, if a manager can give them a feeling that it is easy to correct, and then the employee should feel, okay, manager is not reprimanding me and it is easy to correct. So probably if you can give them that non-threatening environment and a conducive and enabling environment, I'm sure subordinates will take decisive decisions. They don't hesitate in taking decisions. That's what we talk about empowering. Right. Empowering is allowing people to take decisions. So if you don't give that empowering culture, if there is no empowering culture, then employees will be very hesitant to take decisions. Just my 2 cents about. That's my 2 thoughts.
That really makes sense. That really makes sense, Tirmal. Yes. Right.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for the inputs. Could we wrap up with the session, or do we have any more questions from other participants?
I think it's a good idea to wrap up now, although you've been extremely patient in answering all the questions, Malini. Thank you very much. It was also a very interesting concept, and when you think of the topic being decisive, you just tend to think, okay, what's in it? You have to either decide or you don't. But there's now that we have a tool that we can actually implement step by step, it makes a lot more sense. And like I said before, internalizing the tool would help us make better decisions. So thank you for that. If you have any more questions, I request you to take it offline with Malini, because at 7 p.m. we have another webinar by the L&D Mumbai chapter.
Right.
Yeah, thank you, Malini.
It's a pleasure having a nice interaction. Thank you so much, participants, and thanks to L&D Global Hyderabad for the opportunity.
Thanks, Malini.
Thank you.
Thank you, Malini. It was very insightful. We learned a lot.
Thank you so much, Tirmal, and thanks others.
So tomorrow we have a talk by Tirmal Reddy about leveraging paradoxes to succeed at the workplace. Same time, same place. Do tune in.
Really looking forward. Really looking forward. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks once again, Malini.
Thank you.
Gaurav, thank you too.
Thanks, Gaurav. Thanks, others.
Bye-bye.